The Advocate for Success. Season 1, Episode 7, Escape from Determinism. Produced by Elton Thomas.
Empowerment can be expressed through your apparel. Visit the Mission Advocate store on Etsy at etsy.com/shop/missionadvocate.
Stan is an adult male in his late 40s, as he walks around the convenience store, picks up a package of paper plates, and then proceeds to walk out the exit without paying. "Hey buddy, let's bring that to the register," says James, Stan's support staff. Stan looks at James and says, "No dish night." James then laughs, "Yes, let's make it a no-dish night." James then talks Stan through the process of paying. "Reach in your pocket and get your money." Stan reaches into his pocket and pulls out a few bills. "Now give the man the bill with the 5. Stan gives the store clerk a $5 bill, and then starts to walk away. "Get your change, Stan," says James. Stan then gets his change, and they walk to James' car. "You did much better today, buddy." Stan then smiles. No dish night. Stan has something called an intellectual disability, which impacts his moral reasoning skills. Stan has no concept of what is considered stealing, and has a support staff, James, to help him be part of the community, without ending up in jail. Determinism generally suggests that no one has free will, therefore, people should not be held accountable for their actions. People that believe in libertarianism indicate that we have free will, and that everyone should be held responsible for their actions. But what about Stan, who has a disability that impairs his judgment?
Determinism is the idea that all events are predetermined. The concept often relates to biology and heredity, in which case it is sometimes called biological determinism. The philosophy holds that human behaviors, beliefs, and desires are set in stone by genetic nature from birth, and environmental, social, and cultural factors have no impact on the person. Many people who advocate biological determinism use the argument to justify their opinions about intelligence, behavior, and racial categorization. The determinism debate has been a hotly debated topic since the 19th century, when scientists first began analyzing the role of genes in heredity and evolution. Before the discovery of genetics, hereditary traits were attributed to a variety of different causes. The 20th century brought the rediscovery of Austrian botanist Gregor Mendel's work on heredity, and subsequent studies have linked hereditary characteristics to altered sequences in DNA. Some scientists hold that a person's genes determine a person's IQ. Although studies have found a link between genes and IQ, the relationship is relatively weak. Moreover, other factors, such as the quality of education and environment, have been shown to influence an individual's IQ greatly. Nevertheless, the concept of biological determinism remains popular in some circles because it explains why people are born with various mental and physical impairments. Other scientists believe that the person's brain chemistry and the environment in which they live determine their intelligence and behavior. This view, known as behavioral determinism, is not as widely accepted as the scientific theories of innate intelligence or the role of genes in determining intellectual disabilities. A third way of thinking about determinism is to combine behavioral determinism with the concept of predeterminism, which holds that all events are, in some sense, predicted from an unbroken chain of prior occurrences stretching back to the origin of the universe. Although physicists or philosophers do not widely hold this type of determinism, the concept has become popular in some religious circles, particularly with believers who accept quantum mechanics and its underlying uncertainty. Some people also hold that internal motivations, unconscious processes, and childhood experiences largely dictate a person's actions. This viewpoint is sometimes referred to as psychic determinism, and it explains phenomena like slips of the tongue or Freudian slips, dreams, and mental illnesses. Psychic determinism is not as common as behavioral or biological determinism, but it continues to exist as a philosophical viewpoint in the context of mental health and medicine. Some psychologists argue that a person's mental disorder or addiction is a result of a deep-rooted psychiatric trauma in the past. This, in turn, may be a result of childhood trauma or abuse. Philosophers and physicists are also struggling to reconcile the concepts of determinism and free will. Several authors, including Hofer and Ismail, suggest that it is possible to create a deterministic world in which all parts bear some determining or at least partial relationship to others, and in which no particular part, region of spacetime, event, or series of events, takes on an overarching, exclusive, and dominant role that undercuts the rest. Nevertheless, every form of determinism has an opposing force, free will. It may be true that Stan's intellectual disability that causes him to steal unintentionally can be explained by biological determinism. However, does Stan have no free will at all?
Stan yells as his two children, Sam and Megan, race back to the campsite. The last one to camp has to do the dishes. Stan's wife, Laura, is finishing up dinner on the campfire grill as the kids play nearby. Laura yells to the kids, "Dinner's ready." The menu includes pork steaks, corn on the cob, and fried potatoes, which are slightly crispy on the edges and soft in the center of each one. Sam says with a winner's grin on his face, Megan lost the race and has to do the dishes. Stan then pulls out a pack of paper plates. It's a no-dish night. Then Sam and Megan cheer as Stan helps Laura prepare the paper plates. After dinner, Stan gets a package out of the car. It's a s'mores kit. Sam and Megan are so excited, Laura is too, but doesn't show it. As the sun sets, they clean up and extinguish the campfire, and head inside the cabin. Megan and Sam bring wood in from outside, and start a fire in the fireplace. Sam and Megan shared their stories of the adventures they had earlier that day on the hike. "I dared Megan to pick up a toad, and she did," Sam says full of excitement, as Megan sits tall and proud. Laura is so delighted in her children's joy, she reaches over and holds Stan by the hand. They extinguish the fire and headed to bed. As Laura and Stan lay in bed, she places her hand on his cheek. "Promise me something." Stan grabs her hand. "Sure, anything, my love." Laura looks at her husband in the eye. "Promise me that you will be this way always, that you will never change because I love you for you." Stan smiles. "I love you for you too, and yes, I promise." As Stan drifts to sleep, he is unaware of a tiny passenger behind his left ear. Just a few millimeters long, it is what the locals call a deer tick.
Infections caused by tick-borne diseases like Lyme disease can cause a range of neurological symptoms, including brain fog, memory loss, tremors, and even paralysis. The more serious the brain damage, the more assistance a person needs. Many people who suffer from neurological symptoms associated with Lyme disease will require a certain level of assisted living. Depending on the severity of their condition, this can range from simple help getting out of bed to having someone help them bathe and dress. A significant problem is that the symptoms of a typical Lyme disease infection are very similar to the symptoms of many common neurological conditions, making it easy for a doctor not to consider Lyme as the cause. The CDC estimates that up to 20% of all cases of Lyme disease rash are misdiagnosed and that this results in a delay in receiving proper treatment. This can increase the risk of relapses and progression of symptoms. Those who have a chronically debilitating case of Lyme disease can develop a constellation of neurological problems known as Lyme disease encephalopathy or LNB. The inflammatory response to the Borrelia bacteria that causes Lyme disease can lead to the destruction of brain cells and nerve fibers. The unfortunate reality of Lyme disease is that it's so hard to diagnose and too often gets untreated.
He can't even spell his four-letter name, Laura shouts to the insurance company, who will not pay for further testing. Laura has been going around in circles with the insurance companies for months. Doctors had suggested getting testing for meningitis or Lyme, but the insurance would only pay for psychological treatment. For months Laura and the children watched Stan slip away. First, he was having trouble remembering names, then he could not complete entire sentences, and now, well, he needs 24-hour supervision and care. Laura has become so angry at the world. It wasn't until Stan was accepted into assisted living and started receiving Medicaid, that they ran the tests and found that Stan had Lyme disease. The doctor told Laura that this all could have been prevented if Stan was tested sooner and given antibiotics. Though they cannot go on camping trips anymore, Laura, Sam, and Megan decide to try to make the best of it. They visit Stan often and can take him out to places. It's not the life they were hoping for, they are just grateful that Stan is still alive and with them. And from time to time, they can catch a little glimpse of the real Stan inside. Perhaps the most difficult change to see was how Stan seemed to lose his sense of moral reasoning. Laura will feel guilty at times, because of how Stan's behavior reminds her of a child who does not know any better.
Moral reasoning refers to the logical process of determining whether an action is right or wrong. Often, one engages in moral reasoning when faced with a decision over what to do, meaning the actions have yet to occur. When we contemplate our options on what actions to take in a situation, we often engage in an analysis to ensure that our efforts are in alignment with our values. Our values, then, become the standard of what types of people we want to be. Determinism suggests that we do not actually have a choice, and if we did choose our own values to follow, we did not actually choose them. Our choice was not of free will, but rather, a predetermined outcome of a causal event. Our planet, Earth, orbits around the Sun. Since the orbit of the Earth can be predicted or predetermined, determinism applies. Gravity, along with the math of the Earth and Sun, makes it possible to calculate where the Earth will be at any future date and time. Therefore, there is no choice factor in where the Earth will reside. A strong argument can be made that determinism applies when it comes to the Earth's orbit around the Sun. But when it comes to our subjective interests, it gets much more complicated, or even impossible, to predict what choices we will make. Therefore, an argument can be made that determinism can be ruled out as a choice factor. Going back to the basic definition of moral reasoning, the first part of the definition states, the logical process of determining. Did you see it? The word determining. There are logical determining factors in our values that define our sense of moral reasoning. And we can gauge someone's understanding of moral reasoning through something called the Hyde test. The Hyde test suggests that when someone's action goes against their understanding of moral reasoning, then that person will try to hide it. For example, it is commonly understood that stealing is wrong. Typically, when a person steals, they try to do so undetected, hence, hiding their actions. On the other hand, when Stan took the paper plates, he did not try to hide them, thus, did not have the understanding of moral reasoning as a person without an intellectual disability. Determinist advocates argue that people should not be held accountable for their actions since no one has free will. But is free will the proper factor? Perhaps control is a better factor to determine if someone should or should not be held accountable for their actions. Even though Stan may not have the same understanding of moral reasoning as others, the question still remains. Does Stan have any control at all? Or, is there no escape from determinism for Stan?
James gets home just around 4:45 p.m., and his wife, Sarah, is preparing their kitchen for new dish night, where they find a recipe for a meal they've never cooked before, and give it a shot. On tonight's menu, carnitas, which means little meats in Spanish, is a Mexican pork dish. An inexpensive, heavily marbled cut of pork, such as boneless Boston butt, pork shoulder, or picnic ham, is braised or simmered for several hours with seasonings and lard until it is so tender that it can be shredded. "What's that you got there?" Sarah asks James. James responds, "Paper plates. I figure it could also be a no-dish night." Sarah likes the idea as they spend hours having fun in the kitchen learning new Spanish words and enjoying the smell of the slow-cooked pork. After dinner, they cleaned up and put on some music. Sarah and James danced to a slow song playing on their Echo Dot. Glancing over at the open pack of paper plates that were sitting on the counter beside the washed pan they used to cook the pork, she asks, "So, how was your day?" James shares the story about how Stan almost walked out of the convenience store with the paper plates, when Stan would say, "No dish night," there was this look in his eye. I can't explain it, only that it seemed like he was trying to get something through to me. Like he was trying to escape from something. Sarah looks at James and says, "Promise me something." James responds, "Sure, anything." Sarah holds James a little tighter and looks him in the eye, "Promise me, that you will never change, that you will always be this way." The day with Stan flashes through James' mind, "As long as I'm able, I promise that I will never change, my love."